Yeah, I have therapy. I can just tell my therapist that I'll be a couple minutes late, worst case.
Don't use me as an excuse to not do I will not condone this.
I promise I'm going to therapy, Mom. Okay. Welcome back, marketing nerds of the world. It's time for another episode of HAMYAW. And today we want to talk about something that was a bit of an awakening for me when my business started to grow and I started working with bigger and bigger clients. We want to talk about the difference between being a good leader and being a good business person, because there is often a disconnect between the two. And I'm going to start and open this, before I hand the microphone to Margot. Thanks for your patience, Margot. I want to open this by actually just telling a brief story about an experience that I have, which I think is fairly universal in the online business space, especially when you're a subcontractor, is you start climbing the ladder of those clients, things start getting better, you start working on bigger and bigger projects. And then you notice something where you're working with these huge names who have all of this money and are doing all of these sales and serving all of these people, and their businesses on the back end are disasters in some way. Either it's disorganized or the team doesn't know what they're doing, or you can't get a hold of them. And it's really
reactive.
Yeah, they're reactive. Yeah, it's a really disillusioning moment to have. And I think it really happens across the board. But the reality is not everybody who is a good leader, a good creative, even a good producer of content is necessarily good in a managerial role or good in a CEO role. They make mistakes just like all of us do. Just because you've hit seven figures doesn't mean you're not a human being prone to error, let me tell you. But we want to dig into this a little bit today and just talk about what is the difference between a good leader and a good manager and business person, and sort of what can we do to start to fill the gaps. But before we do that, Margot, are you a better leader or a better manager?
I think everyone who's worked with me would be like, leader.
Oh, we love Margot. She's a good leader. Yeah, very that.
It's our new backhanded compliment. But we should parse out that we are not the Brene Brown. There's leadership definitions here of being a CEO and being a leader. That's not what we're talking about. I think we're talking more about thought leadership, content creation, being the leader of a movement and of your audience and
inspiring
being good,
people.
Inspiring. Yeah. And that version of being really amazing, powerful figure versus the day-to-day mechanics of operation. And they're not the same skill. And so I like you, was disillusioned. I also believed that I had all of the skills and was
me too.
Shocked to discover that they were transferable.
I hadn't tried to use the skills yet, but I was certain that I had them and I would do a much better job in their
Exactly.
Let me tell you.
Exactly. It's how can you obviously not see these very obvious blind spots that you have? And it's well, turns out there's a reason they're called blind spots. I'm very good at pointing them out in others, but my
superpower.
No, it reminded me of, I think you guys all, if you have friends that were in med school or doctors now, one of the complaints I would often get from them is that if you wanted to move up in your career as a doctor, which is a clinician, someone who works with people, or even a researcher who's conducting scientific research, the movement upwards on the ladder is management. And you can see in this case, the obvious disconnect from the ability to diagnose and treat someone and work with people to needing to manage a system or finances or difficult behaviors. They're completely separate skill sets. And yet this is considered the linear ladder. And there are so many, it's ridiculous when we're talking about it, but when you're in it, that is just considered the norm for people. And there's no one helping you navigate the transition. And I would say that's the same in so many of our industries, where the thing that got you to where you are is completely separate skill from what you need to move forward.
Yeah. We see this jump kind of happen at multiple stages in the entrepreneurial journey where it's okay, you're starting a business, you have some clients, you're doing well, perfect, time to teach. And you're oh, great. And then you're oh no, I don't have the skills for this at all. That was my first, I think, slice of humble pie in business, is putting together something. It wasn't that I consciously thought I am going to be a better teacher than all these people, but then I got up in front of the room and I was I'm not prepared. Like I don't know what's going on here. But I think that what was so important is that it's like anything else in business is that you have to recognize that it is a journey and that you need to build up these skills. And I think what I don't want to say is let's forgive everybody who's running a 7-figure business is kind of a shitty manager and doesn't want to work on their blind spots. Like they're just people. And it's true they are. But there are some people who aren't great in that category. We shall not name names. But I think what we wanted to talk about and what we really wanted to underline here is the reality that we sometimes forget that these are not the skills that got us started. Is managing these huge teams, is scaling. And you really need so much support. And I actually wrote a post on Facebook today, personally. I also tweeted it. But it was basically like everyone thinks the hardest part of hiring a team is hiring the right people, but it's not. The hardest part of hiring a right team is knowing when to put your hands on your head and just let your team do their goddamn jobs instead of tinkering with everything. And this is a habit I'm trying to break because personally, like I made my living writing, right? I made lots and lots of money doing it. I used to market only for myself. I used to be a team of 1 with a VA. That was it. Now I'm a team of 3 with an OBM, a VA, and a CMO. So things have grown. But I think that what I didn't realize at the time was that having people on and paying them to do the work is not something that you should be hovering over. You can't be precious if you want to move forward. If you want to outsource things, you have to learn how to let people do it, how to let people make mistakes, and how to see what happens if they take the reins. And that I also noticed on one of my launches recently where my CMO, Hunter, fabulous copywriter, so great. She repurposes a lot of my stuff. But I was like, you know what? I'm not going to tinker with the rest of these emails. Like, I think that they're awesome. I know that they're good. Just because I didn't, have my write every single word of them does not mean that I need to go in and tinker. So I'm going to put my hands on my head and just let them ride. Yeah. And it went great. But it's that discipline. And I think Michael Michalowicz, I think that's how his name, has this book called Clockwork, where it talks about letting your team own their section and letting them make mistakes versus doing the bug the shit out of me method, where it's like, okay, just if you don't hear from me, just bug the shit out of me until I give you an answer. Like you need to give people that runway. And it is incredible, even though it's a letting go skill, it's essentially a skill of passivity. It is so hard to build that muscle and have that trust, because frankly, I got frustrated with this in the copywriting world where people were like, well, I can't possibly just let anything go. It's my voice. People are going to know. Yeah. I'm sorry, unless you are a Pulitzer Prize winning novelist, chances are you can have someone mimic your voice and it's going to be okay.
Not mine, Hillary.
My voice is very special. And I had this problem, so I could speak to it where I was like, they'll know if it's not me. And frankly, maybe, but at the same time, is it going to tank your results? No. Is it going to make it easier for you to show up and focus on your shit? Yeah. So that's my rant.
Well, I would also argue, even if you are a Pulitzer Prize winning person, copy is a different skill. In the writing world, people often think because they have written a sentence before that they are qualified to then edit and that they need to be doing your job. Like I've taken classes in accounting and I have never tried to tell my bookkeeper they were wrong or tell my accountant that he was wrong. Never in my life. I've just asked for clarification on something. I'm paying them for their expertise, but it doesn't translate to things like marketing, and it doesn't translate to things like writing, in part, I think, because we feel like we can do it. We feel like it's a part of who we are. My aunt is a teacher. She's retired now, but she said that often you would find administrations be like, oh, this person has a PhD in history. And she would look at them and be like, why does that mean that they can teach 17-year-olds? Like, what does one have to do with the other? Everyone thinks that that's a logical jump. And she'd be like, you know what? In the end, I stopped fighting, because then they get in that classroom with the 17-year-olds and they can't do it. And that's when you start to realize that teaching is a skill, that curriculum building is a skill, that facilitation is a skill. And you go to school for educating and to understand these things. And like, they don't value it until they get in it. And I think that is the same thing that you're seeing happen with management, is that you think, okay, well, once I reach this level of proficiency in my subject matter expertise or in my ability to corral an audience or my ability to dazzle people on stage and perform, that should somehow transfer to something else until you try and do it. I think the more important piece of this is not that there's a disconnect, but that we recognize it and then you do your due diligence to get better. And then there's a second step. So first, do your due diligence. Like right now, you and I are in the teaching world, like trying to really unlearn everything we've ever learned. And we can do a separate aside on that. It has been so taxing. But there also comes a point with certain skills, like bookkeeping, for example. I tried to learn that one too. And I was like, I'm outsourcing that. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't touch it. I don't even care if my bookkeeper makes mistakes. I'm like, don't make me look at it. I don't know what that is. Just figure it out. But I know enough to know that it's not a good use of my time, because I will spend so many hours trying to understand something that is not my proficiency, but at least I know enough to know who to hire and if that person's good enough. When it comes to teaching, I don't want to hire it out. Like, that's something that I was like, oh, this is something I could get better at. Let me find out how. And so, like, knowing the difference between the things you absolutely should not touch and there's weaknesses that like aren't worth getting better at, just being proficient enough to be dangerous, but like, you know, it's a bad use of your time. Let the experts handle it. Take off the reins, and then enhancing your strengths on things that you might not be familiar with, but you can build the muscle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the divide is so important. What's so interesting is that what classifies someone as like a good inspirational leader and a good like personality is just a totally different skill set to what makes someone a good manager and CEO. Because with the personality and leadership, you are very eloquent. You have really good ideas. You can explain things to people very well. You know how to put some kind of like step-by-step together.
Egocentric.
I mean, who am
Not
I,
me.
really? And then stage presence, which builds all of this trust. One of my favorite YouTube channels, Philosophy Tube, by the amazing Abigail Thorne. There's this whole episode that she did called Who's Afraid of the Experts? And it's basically about the fact that the actual experts in, let's say, immunology, for example, aren't really media trained people. They don't really have a face. They don't want to be visible. So they're back there doing the work. Whereas you have someone who's media trained, who has that presence, who knows how to talk to the press, who's at the forefront. So they're kind of like the leading voice, but they're not actually the one doing the things behind the scenes. But we equate their presence with the fact that they're here and they're also there at the same time. So we see these people with the stage presence, this awesomeness. And then of course it's disillusioning to realize in the back end that they're not really comfortable outsourcing. They're still kind of a bottleneck and obsessive about their work. They don't track details, or there's someone on their team who's supposed to, but there's so much going on that it's not working right now. Like a million things can be going wrong here that you just don't notice here. But just because here is good also doesn't mean that here is bad. But it is, again, two totally separate skill sets. And I know for me that I'm actually more hands-off on my team now than it was when it was one person. Like right now, my strengths are creating new content, showing up, giving my talks, teaching, serving my clients, whereas my team helps create that omnipresence, helps create that content, helps me put my launches together. And if I were the old Hillary, it would be almost impossible to get anything done, because I would be like, okay, I'm just going to write all the sales emails. Everyone sit over there. I'll let you know when I'm done. And then it's 3:00 in the morning the night before launch. And I'm like, guys, please help me. So it's been a real test for me, because I knew I had a gap. Zach knew I had a gap, my husband. He was like, it's a rep thing. Stick with it. We've talked about this on the show before, where we want to be everyone's friend. And, you know, it's hard for us to let go of things sometimes. Oh, hi, Dolly. It's hard for us to really kind of bring the pieces together in that way and trust somebody to take care of our businesses for us. But if we want to grow, we've got to learn how to let that go. And we have to make sure that we're growing at a pace where we can kind of sustain this build and this skill building. And that's sort of what I'm focused on this year. But I think some people just grow too fast or are so into their presence that they forget about the skill.
Oh my God. Hello. So it becomes obsessive. Like, I'll speak for myself, of like misperceptions of me, like control and branding was so important. So like part of it's control. Part of it is like wanting to control what other people think, which like is not possible. Realizing that I was the bottleneck on top of the funnel stuff was like such a huge sobering moment. And I've chosen like creative ways to outsource that. And first I thought of it as like a moral failing. I was like, oh, well, if you can't do
the other thing.
top
It's
of
not
the
a
funnel,
moral failing.
and I was like, no, actually, it turns out you're smarter if you can figure out that you can outsource it. So like one of the ways I'm outsourcing it is partnerships. So I've done partnerships where I try and have as much creative control as possible. But there's one product that I launched where I totally forgot about the artwork because it was all virtual. So I was like, oh, it's an audio file. People will just download it. It's not a big deal. Nope. There was like a cover and I looked at it and I was like, it looked like 1990s. Like nobody even tried. Like the font doesn't even make sense. And I'm looking at it and it's like, well, this is a travesty. Everyone's going to think that I'm some hack. And it turns out no one cared. It did not affect whether they listened or not. It didn't drive or reduce traffic because there's so many other factors besides that one thing. And like our creative control is important. And I don't mean to discount that because I think
definitely not.
You do need to pay attention to the details when you are in this position. That matters. But as you're building, knowing which fights to pick, this would have been a waste of time at this point in my career to die on that hill. Now, maybe in 10 years when I have really, really clear brand guidelines and they violated them, for example, okay then. But like also the onus was on me to have like noticed it in the contract, which I did not. So like if anything, it was a better use of my time to not have to hire a designer or try and do it myself like an idiot, which is totally what I would have done, right? And then I would have gone back and forth with the designer and all it is a freaking icon and it can be updated at any time. It doesn't matter. But for launch, my ego was so wrapped up in it. I'm like, oh my God, people are going to see this. They're going to see this. What are they going to think? And it's like, well, they're not going to think anything. They're going to move on with their lives.
That's so true. And I think that what it comes down to, it's like, so we know what the leadership skills are, but if we were to talk about the skills over here, the CEO, the business, I think it would be, first of all, like learning to prioritize what you own and what you don't own. And it can't be everything, guys. It just can't. As much as we want to, it just can't be everything. And also, like, of course, good hiring practices, like be willing to pay a little bit more for people who can handle it. And I've talked about this on the show before, and my team makes fun of me because they heard me on the episode be like, I am baby. And so now I'm turning and they're like, so we know that you are baby, but being able to know like what you own, what your team owns, having the systems, like taking the time to put the systems in place and make sure that they work. Cause I feel like a lot of business owners like, we're in Asana and it's a mess, you know, and there's like all these project management systems that get updated once and are never used again. Like it is just hard to stay on top of that, but having really clear systems in your business so that when you bring someone on, you're comfortable doing that. And I think most importantly, like learning to put your ego to the side. I think learning to let people own things and make mistakes and be resilient is how you build a much, much stronger team. And that is the hardest thing to do when you're a perfectionist and, you know, a micromanager, which I think every creative is in their special way.
Also being wrong. Like I think one of the most humbling thing was realizing that I shouldn't be doing my own marketing. And like, as a marketer, I was just like, what? No, this is mine. I will write all the sales pages. I will write all the emails. I will do all the promotion. I will do all the ads. I will do all of this. And then it just came to a point where I was like, no, actually, because you're a marketer, you are so bad at being objective about yourself. You need to have right of refusal. But after that, you need to like, let the experts do their thing and put yourself in content creation mode.
Yep, no doubt. And own what you own. Like maybe it's content creation mode. Maybe it's like doing your podcast. Maybe it's like serving your clients, but figuring out sort of someone that you can trust to outsource and then letting them do their damn job so that you don't become the bottleneck. Because for me, I think like I have my solid team members, but now we brought someone on for Facebook ads, Dottie Reynolds, who's awesome. We're going to work with probably Latasha Booth for the upcoming launch of Hot Seat Beast. Like we're bringing on these other teams to build things and focus on things that none of us own. So I think really getting in that habit of figuring out what do you own, what does your team own, and how can you continue to build these sort of managerial skills as you grow is one of the most important questions you can ask yourself. So you get out of great leader mode and into how do I kind of do both? How do I walk and chew gum at the same time?
Yes. All right. Before we wrap up, anything else you want to add?
Yes, this is Dolly Purrton. She's my new kitten. Thank you all for your patience. And I'm sure her purring just straight into the microphone. But she's really excited to be here. And I'm sure it'll be a fixture on more HAMYAW episodes.
I think our viewership just went up.
It definitely did.
Look at that.
Subscribe to Dolly Purrton's channel, everybody.
Oh. She really should have a channel.
I know she really should. I'm going to fuck around and make an Instagram account for her and Ham. We'll see.
Do it. You're going to be an Insta celebrity. All right. So we talked about the disconnect between subject matter expertise and the ability to teach. We talked about leadership versus management and what and why these disconnects exist because they are completely different skills and how acquiring those new skills, one, requires self-awareness. It requires humility and the ability to work on building up your weaknesses, but also enhancing your strengths and let the other people do what they are good at. So we want to hear from y'all. Where have you also made this mistake? Where have you reached a certain point in your career where the skills that got you there can no longer take you where you need to go? Where have you had to eat a slice of humble pie? Tell us how you're doing on outsourcing. We want to hear all the dirty details down in the comments. And if you like this episode, please like it below, subscribe to our channel, and share it with your friends. I am Margot Aaron.
And I'm Hillary Wise.
This has been Hillary and Margot Yell at Websites HAMYAW, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Ciao for now, guys.